Most people don't read contracts.
Let's meet Andy.
When you're buying a piece of property, it's not like buying a car that you could go and kick the tires in order to make sure that you don't have to pay the special assessment. The right box needs to be checked off. When you're dealing with a property, there's a lot of inspections that have to be done. Of course, in real estate, everything is location, location, location.
Yeah.
You also got to be really careful with knowing who the seller is, having someone investigate if that's really the actual owner of the property.
Right. The dangers on this. Real estate is one of the fastest ways to build wealth in Florida. But if you don't understand how the legal side of the deal works, contracts, title, liens, ownership, you could end up buying something that's someone else's problem and not a great investment. Today on the Marty Davis Show, we have a great real estate lawyer, Anderson Castro, with us. And he's going to be breaking down those legal rules that are in effect in Florida and to help you understand the importance of having a lawyer as your partner in a real estate transaction. So every buyer, every investor, every entrepreneur should understand all of the things that are involved before you sign on the dotted line. Welcome back to the Marty Davis Show. I'm a business attorney and entrepreneur, and we're here to share real strategies for real success behind building wealth and protecting the assets that you do have. And more importantly, avoiding those expensive mistakes. This episode is sponsored by the Miami Marriott Biscayne Bay, a true downtown waterfront escape. Take in stunning bay views, enjoy a rooftop pool, and stay just moments from Miami's top attractions in the heart of the city. Visit www.marriottbiscaynebay.com to learn more. Today we're joined by Anderson Castro. We all call him Andy. He's a real estate attorney, a title specialist. He's been a property manager for years on his own investments, and someone who grew up literally living inside the Miami real estate world. From managing apartment buildings as a kid, helping investors and homeowners close on deals safely, protecting their interest, Anderson has seen every side of this business. Let's meet Andy. Welcome, Andy.
Hey, Marty, how are you?
I'm good, and I'm so glad you're here because, we've done a number of real estate deals together, and I've referred a lot of real estate deals to you because you're the only real estate lawyer I use. But Andy, after almost 30 years of practicing and in Florida real estate, what's the biggest mistake people make when they're buying a property in Florida?
Well, Marty, a lot of people don't realize that there goes a lot of studying and evaluating, investigating what you're actually buying. Right from the moment that you sign on the dotted line, you have to make sure that you know exactly what all those words say, because most people don't read contracts, as you know, and that's why you have to make sure that you have somebody on your side that reviews before you sign. Because if not, you could really work yourself into a situation that you don't have your interests protected.
Well, some people have told me, well, Marty, it's a standard contract. Everybody does the same thing. Is that really true, or is there chances to change a lot of things on that standard contract?
Yeah, well, it is a standard contract. However, there's a lot of little boxes and a lot of blanks that need to be filled out correctly. And if you rely on someone that doesn't have a mastery of that language, you could check the wrong box and it can make a difference. A really good example is if you were to buy a condo. Mm-hmm. And most condos, or many, have a special assessment. Well, in order to make sure that you don't have to pay the special assessment, the right box needs to be checked off. And that is just one of 10 or 20 different instances in the contract that could make a difference and change the outcome.
Right. And now, since the Surfside collapse, we're seeing all kinds of those special assessments, and they're not just $5,000 and $10,000. I think I read down at the cricket club in Miami, the assessments were $175,000 per unit. Right.
Yeah, I recently had a friend tell me that they have 3 units at the cricket club. The cricket club is a building, as everybody knows, from the 1970s, very, very popular when it was built. And it has very high maintenance. It's always had high maintenance. A lot of people come from out of town and they're not aware of the rules and the new laws that have been passed regarding condos and the tightening of those regulations. Mainly that buildings, once they're 40 years old after being built, there has to be an engineering evaluation done of the structure to make sure that it's solid for the things that happen at Surfside don't occur again. And 10 years thereafter, those 40, it must be done again.
And you're the person who goes in and makes certain that that 40-year is done and what it's said correctly. So, because it's important that they follow the problems that are found, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're buying a piece of property, it's not like buying a car that you could go and kick the tires and right from just observation know what you're really doing. When you're dealing with a property, there's a lot of inspections that have to be done. Some people say, oh, I don't want to spend the money, but you should, because something as simple as the roof, something as simple as checking for termites, which we have 18 different types of termites here in Florida, that's an important step that must be done to make sure that you know where you're buying and have a professional analyze it, have the right team in place to assist you to make an informed decision and know exactly what you're getting into.
I was buying a house up in Fort Lauderdale that was on the water, and you were having me do these inspections on it. And the inspector came back to me and said, it's not on a slab. It's, got a crawl space underneath, but the wood's all rotted out. But I think it'll be fine as long as you just run your sofa in the living room along the way that the joists are. And clearly you don't want to buy a house that you have to put your furniture where the best support is on the floor. So you saved me a big amount of money on that. So the other thing that I hear from investors, they'll tell me, well, we have a real estate agent, and that real estate agent is finding the property for us. And so they're doing a good job, and I'm feeling really comfortable with them. What's the difference between what a realtor brings to the table and what you bring to the table? And isn't that a team approach, having a great realtor and a great lawyer when you're buying property?
Absolutely. I first want to say that I love realtors.
Yes.
Realtors are the best. And yeah, the attorney is part of that team that assists the realtor. Realtor finds you the property and is going to guide you. Hopefully, it depends. We have many realtors. Some are more seasoned than others. So that's where a real estate attorney comes in and can help you make sure that you've looked at everything that must be looked at and to ensure that you're covered, just in case that didn't come up or the realtor, it's really a team approach.
Right. And so I'm looking for a piece of property. I've contacted a realtor, and they're working on finding me a location to buy. And so what time should I bring in the real estate lawyer? Because it probably starts with the realtor before I'm even thinking about a lawyer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The perfect time is before you sign that contract. The realtor will help you locate. Of course, in real estate, everything is location, location, location.
Yeah.
And hopefully you have narrowed that down and found the property that you like and that you would like to buy. But before you sign that contract, which many times is prepared by the realtor, but it needs to be reviewed by a real estate attorney to make sure that it's exactly what you want and that all the issues that are going to come up, you've reviewed.
Right.
And know exactly. And if you don't know, at least he knows or she knows and can, inform you to make the decision.
Right. So, in other words, if I'm a buyer, I should be calling in a realtor before I make that written offer.
Absolutely.
Okay. And and if I'm a seller, I don't really need the realtor. Do I need a lawyer before I list the property, or is that I get that lawyer involved after we get an offer?
Yeah, the earlier you get the lawyer involved, the more beneficial it's going to be.
Okay.
Like when you sign a listing agreement as a seller, there's been many changes recently in regards to how are you going to pay the realtor,
Right.
what's going to be the consequences, and most people when they review, and it's usually something short, but the words are very meaningful and could really determine if you're going to sell the house or not.
Right.
Because besides compensation, there's the period in which you are exclusively listing it with that agent. And there needs to be, you need to go over it with a real estate attorney because there are consequences that could lock you in with that person if later you decide they're not doing the job that you desire.
And let's talk about it because buying a property, whether it's a small home to a multi-unit apartment building or an office building, there's a lot of costs involved. And is there, when you're buying a single family home or a condo, is there a price differential in bringing in that lawyer before you sign a contract or before you make an offer than it is if they came in a little later?
No, not really. You actually, the cost would be the same. The cost would be the same because that's part of the whole process. It's not just going and buying something at the store. It's really a more holistic approach where you need from the very beginning to have somebody review it and make sure that it's what you think it is.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It probably at times might even be cheaper, so you make certain that the offer is right to begin with, right? In the legal language.
Absolutely.
So, no.
Yeah, a lot of times just something as simple as what the deposit is.
Right.
Some people would maybe think, well, I want to put a large deposit, and they might not be aware of what the traditional and customary manner is and, advise you on what's the best approach,
Sure.
which, financially will be in your best interest apart from the legal part.
Sure. Yeah. No. And it's
And
kinda
also
like
who's holding the deposit.
yeah.
Because if you were, for instance, to give the deposit to a third party that's out of state or a third party that you don't know who they are, you could lose that deposit.
Right.
It needs to be somebody reputable that has an established track record and is licensed and insured.
Right. So no lawyer is going to want to lose their license over a deposit for a residence, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or most, I should say. There's some out there, but the bar is getting a hold of those people anyway. So it's kind of like, it reminds me, I've seen a sign in a barber shop that was in the window that says, "We fix $5 haircuts." And you as an attorney can fix some of those things or eliminate them to begin with. Get that $35 haircut, you'll look great, and you don't have to run around with half your hair done on the right side and the wrong side on the other, right?
Yeah, you definitely get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And if you go about it by looking at park benches advertising,
Yeah.
you're not going to have a good result.
Yeah. So now, how long have you been practicing?
30 years.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about getting properties. And I know there's been a lot of talk about foreclosure auctions. Tell us about that. What's your thoughts on that and the dangers there?
Yeah, well, you know that here in Florida, the only way somebody can lose a property is through the courts. It's a judicial foreclosure. And that is a lengthy process where everything has to be done right. Like, for instance, when the lawsuit is filed, certain people have to be served, have to be notified that that action is taking place. And if all the correct parties are not included, then that could be a problem later on a foreclosure. So foreclosures typically have the most type of problems later. And it's because usually there's been an unorthodox approach to paying for the property. So imagine if somebody doesn't pay their mortgage, they usually don't pay the water bill and they usually don't pay the HOA And there's usually other debts that are involved, a tax lien.
Mhm.
So when you go to a foreclosure, it's a little bit dicey, you know. A long time ago, it was a much cheaper option. But nowadays, if you really, really evaluate it, it's not that much cheaper because there's been so much appreciation, and you got to really be careful with the foreclosures. But basically, it's a judicial process which ends up in an auction. And that auction, the government sells the properties to the highest bidder, and the lender, the person who's owed the money, has a credit up to the amount that they're owed.
Right.
And a big difference is that before it used to be on the courthouse steps, but some time ago, several years ago, it went online. So now we're dealing with a global auction, and you have people in other countries, in Monaco and other places, that are bidding.
Right.
So that has raised the prices, which is good for the bank, but not so good for the buyers always.
Right, because people are saying, "Oh, it's in Miami; it must be gorgeous.
Yeah.
View of the ocean, probably." Yes.
Yeah.
For that
So-
$150,000 house. right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So one thing that happens a lot is that people see a low price and they believe they're getting the property, but in reality, it's a condo association lien
Right.
that they're buying. There's an underlying debt with the bank, which is not being satisfied. So you inherit that, and you're really only paying off the HOA. So
Right.
I've had that before, and it's dangerous. You could really lose all your money.
Right. So you could be buying a place and it's got a $50,000 condo association lien. You pay $50,000 for it online, but unfortunately, no one was looking at it, and there's a $400,000 mortgage that now you owe on that property, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. And that's why you need a person like you to look at it. before
Absolutely.
you-
And they could also be that person who owes the money, who hasn't paid for 5 years, they're occupying the property. So, possession is 9/10 of the law.
So then you got to get them out of there.
Then you got to get them out of there. Then you're going to have to definitely come see me.
Oh, yes. So lots of pitfalls. It's not just an easy
No,
thing
I
to
would
do.
be very careful with that.
Okay, very good. Let's walk us through what's the process in buying a house?
Well, first you select the property you want, you narrow that down, and then you have to come to an agreement with the seller on the amount. That's really a big issue. And then the details in the contract. When you're dealing with real estate, it has to be in writing. If we talk about it, that's great and dandy, but it must be written in order for it to be truly enforceable. So the contract is really outcome determinative, and you really have to be careful on the way the offer is presented. So you have an offer, when it's accepted, it becomes a contract, and then we're on our way. We have a ticket to the movies.
Sure.
Now, many things have to be done in order to ensure that that's a smooth purchase. Inspections of the property, like we were talking about, which is multi-layered, from the roof to the termites to the electrical. Many people pick one person to do all of that. I like the approach for each discipline by a professional in that field. That would give you a better outcome. And then
the pitfalls. You and I've talked before, and we've kind of talked about, the dangers on this. And so if you're a buyer and the seller says, or the seller's realtor says, I have an inspection person here, we've already done the inspection. What could be the pitfalls?
well, obviously,
It's not your guy, right?
It's not your guy. You want somebody on your side that's independent and neutral from anything with the other party,
Right.
to make sure that it's done right and it's done with your interests in mind, not theirs.
Right.
So yeah, you got to definitely have somebody help you select those professionals that will do the inspections to make sure that they're done right and that you have a proper outcome.
Right. And so someone like you is going to protect your client's interest in finding the right person to be able to do those
Absolutely.
inspections. What about, you read in the paper about, somebody sold this house that they really didn't own. And how do you protect against that? What's that? What's the downfall in that?
Right. Well, Marty, that since probably after World War II, the system in our country is based on title insurance. And title insurance is unlike any other insurance because it covers the stuff that happened in the past. It protects you for the future, but it protects you from buying a property and having those type of problems. Not the correct seller, undisclosed debts, forgeries even, okay? So no bank will lend you money in the United States without the title insurance. And in order for the title insurance to be provided, certain things have to be done. A title search on the history of the property, see the chain of title of all the documents regarding that property, a city lien search letter to see whether there's open permits,
Right.
whether there's violations, whether there's taxes that are owed. You know, taxes are supreme to all the other debts. The government's going to always be paid. And if you don't pay your taxes for 3 years, the government takes the property away. So I have a case right now where that's going on, where they're in their third year and they're selling it because they apparently are having some trouble. So you got to really look at it carefully beforehand. You know, that contract, if done correctly, provides you a period of time for me to review.
To do those things,
Yeah, to
right?
do
Yeah.
all those things that are necessary. It takes time. It's not done overnight, even though it could be done very quickly. But you really need somebody that's working for you, that you can call and the person will be responsive, rather than calling a place and talking to a clerk or to a secretary and not getting the answers you need quickly.
That's right. It's like you can call the IRS and ask them how much money you should spend on your taxes, but that may not be the most efficient way of handling things.
For sure.
And the more important part is once you find the stuff, then you can work with the other side to get it fixed, right?
Right. That's, you know, one thing
That's
is
the beauty.
Yeah. The information gives you what there's there. And then how do we fix that? That's also what I do.
Right.
I fix that before you close. Make sure you don't inherit that problem and that you never have an issue. The title insurance protects you up to the amount of the purchase. So if you're buying it for $100,000, I don't think there's any properties right now,
but, you know.
but you're only protected for that amount that you paid.
Right.
So if you're getting a deal, we were talking about that before. If you found a great deal and you are getting a property for $100,000 and it's worth $1 million, you know, you have to triple check everything to make sure that it's right. You don't want an heir to come down Actually, right next door at the building next door, I had a case where a Japanese man bought pre-construction. And I remember the case because his last name had 15 letters.
Wow.
And another friend of mine had purchased the condo. He got title insurance. And one day he had somebody come knock on his door and say, "Hey, this is my apartment." And he's like, "What are you talking about? This is, you know, I paid for it. I did everything correctly." And luckily, the title insurance did cover that claim, resolved it. My friend did not have a problem, and he was able to keep his condo.
Very good. Yeah, no. So it's important. And, you know, there's what's called a promulgated rate for that insurance. What does that mean? And if I go to you versus another lawyer or a title company, is the price of that insurance any different?
Well, unlike every other insurance that you may purchase, title insurance is set, the price, the premium, by the state of Florida, the Office of Insurance Regulation. So regardless of where you get that insurance, because they are different companies, the premium will be the same. What you really are and when you retain a real estate attorney, you're paying for the other services that are involved in doing the closing.
Okay.
So the title insurance is the same everywhere. You're going to pay the same. It's based on the purchase price, and it's set by the state of Florida.
Okay, great. So it won't matter who I go to for the cost of the title insurance, but it will matter on all of those other things and the protection on the liens and all of that. Now, you said that title insurance only protects you what's happened in the past. So what did you mean by that? Is that talking about appreciation on property after you buy it? Tell us about that.
No, what I meant is that every property has a history, and usually there's been many owners. And in order to make sure, like many people pass away, and then their heirs, a lot of things can develop from there, whether it goes to a probate administration in court or whether it's in a trust. There's many pitfalls that can occur if that is not done correctly. So every property has a history, and the title insurance protects you that that history is correct and accurate, and that you're buying what you actually think that you're buying. And so it protects the prior occurrences regarding the property.
Okay.
That
But what about I bought a property, that $100,000 deal that I got, and I got the entitled insurance through you. You did everything, and it all was great. But 5 years later, I'm going to sell it for $1 million, and all of a sudden, something comes out of the woodwork as a problem. Is it the lawyer that has protected you for what could happen in the future as well by having a lawyer look at it besides title insurance?
No, absolutely. I mean, beside the title insurance is giving you a guarantee, and it gives you that extra protection. But the lawyer is actually, when the real estate work is for the closing is done, is looking at everything regarding the property.
Right.
Not only the title stuff, but also open permits, violations, that make you aware before you actually sign on that dotted line.
Right. So the stuff that isn't protected by insurance,
exactly,
you're protecting the client from.
Additionally, yes.
Okay, great. And people talk about homestead here in Florida. What does it mean when your property is your homestead?
Well, it means it's your primary residence where you live the majority of the year, and that you have the intent to return to that property, and it's your castle. And we're lucky enough to have the strongest homestead law, and it's part of the Florida Constitution, to protect for an unlimited amount. That's why you see such incredible palaces here, because the homestead usually is restricted to a certain dollar amount. But in Florida, it's unlimited in regard to the amount of money. So that gives you a special protection against any creditors, aside if you have mortgage on that property to purchase it, and aside from actually taxes and governmental stuff. You're protected from, let's say, American Express coming to, collect on that bill. They can't force you out of your home or anything like that because you have the homestead protection.
Right.
But you could only have one property in your homestead.
And there are documents that need to be filed that you can file for people to ensure that that property will be their homestead, correct?
Not only that, yes, I do help them with that process. We have an additional benefit, which is called portability. And portability is you have your home, you've lived there for X number of years, you've accumulated through homestead a tax saving. And now you're able to buy another home and take a portion of that tax savings with you to the new home, further reducing what your taxes will be.
Oh, liability for the new place in the future. So
Yes.
that $100,000 home that I sell for $1 million and buy one for $2 million, I could be saving and paying money on it like I was my 100,000 maybe, or there's a deduction.
Right. Normally,
huge deduction.
Yeah, there will be a deduction,
Yeah.
and you're going to pay less money. And that is also why you see so many people from all over the world wanting to come to our town and our area to purchase, because most places don't have that.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Good to know, and another benefit of a real estate lawyer, right? So let's talk about, we have a number of business owners that watch our podcast. And in talking about because you handle commercial transactions as well, right?
Yes.
So what are the biggest pitfalls that you're seeing with entrepreneurs when they're buying a commercial piece of property, whether it's retail or residential?
Well, that 40-year certification, that 40-year engineering structural report that must be done. Many properties either don't have the report, or there's things that must be done in order to pass that certification. A lot of multi-family buildings, a lot of warehouses. It applies to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that comes up a lot. And you also got to be really careful with knowing who the seller is, having someone investigate if that's really the actual owner of the property.
Right.
Because as you know, we have a lot of foreigners that come to buy here, and they buy through different structures that may be offshore companies, and that makes it some additional workers required
Sure.
to make sure that everything is correct and it's not some fraudster that's trying to cheat you out of it. So that's important.
Right.
So the 40-year certification is definitely a big one.
Right. And also it's important to do your due diligence when you're buying a multi-unit apartment building to make certain that the deposits are in place and the deposits that the seller is saying that he's holding are what the tenant's saying that the seller's holding too, right? Isn't that a big pitfall?
Yeah, absolutely. When you buy a piece of property, whether it's multifamily or it's just a condo or a house, if there's a tenant in there, that changes the whole ball game, because now that you're going to inherit that, and we have these tenant estoppel letters, which are to confirm what are the actual terms and understandings. Is there a problem with the property? Is the roof caving in?
Right.
And additionally, what are the deposits? What do they pay first and last? Have they prepaid for 5 years? You need to know that stuff.
Right.
Because you're going to have to deal with it. And you want to know beforehand. You don't want to wake up and now you have the problem.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely part of the work that I do to make sure that it's correct.
Yeah. And you're making certain that the representations of the seller are correct for taxes, insurance, and all those things that go on with a commercial piece of property, right?
Absolutely.
Because clearly, if there is a difference, you're stuck with the difference as the buyer if you close on that and don't know it.
Yeah, I mean, you have a tenant and they leave and they're going to want the deposit back. Well, if it wasn't done correctly, then it's going to come out of your pocket. If you did it with me, then at the closing, you're going to get a credit for that amount and you're fine.
Yeah. Deposits on commercial properties can be big.
Huge.
Yeah. So it could make a big difference in that bottom line profit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Miami's become one of the biggest destinations for foreign investors coming to Florida. What should international buyers understand about the legal process here before buying a property?
Yeah, we definitely are built on foreign investors, no doubt about it, or even people from another state. They really need to understand what they're getting into, because like for instance, people in other countries, they don't even know what title insurance is, because they don't even have that system in place. You're making me think of a friend of mine that was buying a property over in Bimini.
Okay.
And as you know, Bimini is an independent country and it has different laws, and they don't have the same system of keeping track of who the owners are. And that makes me very cautious, because you are not, you might not get what you think you're getting.
Right.
So yeah, when foreigners have to also understand that if they don't buy with the right structure, then it could be a big problem. Many people, like in South America, they traditionally like to put everything in their name individually. And that's fine, but it could definitely develop into a problem later on, because as you know, if you're a foreigner and you were to pass away, the estate rules and the federal estate taxes are huge if you're not an American citizen or resident.
Right. So structure is important when you're buying a property.
Absolutely. It can make a real big difference. Additionally, liability issues that come up. You have a building, somebody falls. Yeah, you have your insurance, but if that claim is more than your policy amount, it's going to come out of your pocket.
Right. And it could be the value of the building that you own.
Or more.
Or more, because it could be, if you put it in your personal name, they could go after all your assets.
Absolutely.
So structure is important.
And a lot of people from out of that are not from here don't realize the aggressive attorneys that exist in Florida that advertise every day on the radio telling people, hey, if you fall, call me. And, is there enough lighting in the building? And all these things, which, by the way, in the 40-year inspection, the lighting of the building is part of it. There's,
That's
for
great.
the parking area, and it's pretty detailed.
Yeah. So whether people are tripping on sidewalks or falling on a parking block or getting hurt in one of the units, you've got to really be careful and think of the liability that you're carrying. It's not just insurance.
I would give you the example of Miami Beach,
Okay.
where we have pets, dogs, for instance, that we all love. And it's very common for people to have a dog in their house or in their apartment. But a lot of people don't know that your liability insurance normally does not cover dog bites.
Right.
So that's something to consider when you're going to rent an apartment and setting your rules or on how you're going to approach it, and try to avoid things that can come up that you never could think of, because it could be not your tenant, it could be a visitor of the tenant.
Sure.
So anybody that comes into the property, and I've had cases like that as well, where somebody's dog got loose. It wasn't even intentional. The dog went down the block and they bit somebody, and the homeowner got sued, and insurance did not cover it.
Right.
So there's a lot of little details.
Sure. Well, and you're bringing up about tenants. There's all kinds of things to review in a purchase of a building with the rental units in it. But there's also major improvements that you can help investors with. They buy a 20 unit building and they've got a bunch of old leases. You have that ability to go in and modify those leases, move them up, talk about what's the correct rent, maybe do a whole better lease than what's already there, right?
Yeah, you'll be lucky if they have a lease. A lot of places it's month to month and they don't have a written lease. And that really leaves you exposed to a whole array of things that could happen. And you got to remember, there's professional tenants that go from building to building, and they know that they could work the system because the law in Florida is in favor of the tenants, and many people don't realize that. And you could be out a substantial amount of money before you react and have somebody on your team that could help you manage that situation.
Right. So even if an investor is not buying or selling a property, they may want to come to you and have those leases reviewed and look at the insurance contracts that they have and all those kinds of things as well, because you can provide better protection.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And maybe a whole lot more money for them.
Yeah. And in the current state of affairs that our country is living through, there's a little wrinkle that a lot of people haven't considered, which is that we have a lot of people that are from other countries, and there's no requirement as to what that person's immigration status is to rent an apartment. There's no law that says that, because we could have people that are tourists and come here, but now you have a situation where you have the government targeting certain groups and going to buildings looking for people that maybe lived there 4 years ago. But when you have ICE agents showing up with machine guns and masks, it's a little scary. And you have to really look at who your tenants are if you want that to last and not have a problem.
Right.
Because imagine you have an apartment rented, and they might not come looking for Joe, or they might be looking for Joe and they knock on somebody's door and it's Maria. But they don't care if Joe's not there. They'll take Maria.
Right.
So now you're out a tenant, and the economic consequences of that are staggering.
Right. And if you didn't have a lease and you didn't have a security deposit and you didn't have last month's rent, you're out all of those things. So, and if they rounded up 50% of the people in your building because you didn't really look at who your tenants were, you could be out a lot of money and then have to wait until you find more tenants to get a stream of income. Huge.
Yeah, it's a big problem, actually.
Yeah.
We got to definitely have secure borders, but we've got to really look at the way it's executed.
Right. And more importantly, how you execute the leases on your properties and
Absolutely.
while you do that. Yeah, and keep the money. Why do you think Florida, and especially Miami, continues to attract real estate investors from all over the world?
Well, I'm truly a Miamian,
Uh huh.
so I have a biased opinion. But we just simply have the greatest weather on the planet. That no one can dispute that. And I must say, we have the most beautiful people on the planet. And then there's the home run of that question, which is that our properties have appreciated three, four times what they were. I recently had the unfortunate revelation that that doesn't happen in every city. Let's take New York City, for
Yeah.
instance. New York City, the city of the world. I was actually even born there. Everybody loves it. It has all the sightseeing. And you would think, well, a property in New York is worth millions. And it's done really well. And in reality, the majority, not all, but the majority of properties in New York City have actually depreciated. And it's before the new mayor.
Yeah.
This has been going on for some time, for many, many years. And there's many, many properties that are not sellable because they lose money. The rent that they can collect because of rent
Rent
stabilization
controls.
law,
Yeah. No.
yeah, those have really killed the small property owners. And it's a big, big problem. So, why do people come to Florida and why do they come to Miami? Because we don't have that problem.
There you go.
That right there is a huge attraction to be able to make a wise investment. And anybody who gets off the plane and they just go down Julio Tuttle, they say, you know what? I'm gonna bet on Miami because this place is beautiful.
Yeah. Well,
And I'm gonna make money.
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we're filming from the beautiful Biscayne Bay Marriott Hotel, and as you can see, our background is fabulous Biscayne Bay, and one of the condo buildings that are directly on the bay. And we're in the middle of winter, and people are out boating and at the beach. So no reason why not to live here, right? So it's great. Andy, I like to get our listeners and viewers to get to know you a little better. And I think the best way to do that is you already told us your expertise, and clearly you know real estate and you know real estate law. But let's get to know a little bit more about Andy on some rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you questions. Just tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. What is one legal mistake people make all the time when buying property in Florida?
Not calling me before they sign.
Love that. What is the one thing every real estate investor should check before buying a property?
How much the taxes are on the property.
One myth about Florida real estate law you wish people understood.
If it's not on paper and signed by both parties, it's usually not enforceable. Or will cost you many thousands of dollars to make it enforceable.
There you go. The hidden talent that most people don't know you have.
Very diligent and persistent.
Very good. You know, you and I have had closings at gas stations, at online with people from different countries, people that are here building boats at the Miami Boat Show. You are there, and you are there when people need it. You're doing a closing today for a client that I forwarded over to you, and they are a couple who are buying a duplex. They called us the day they looked at the property and said, we want to buy this and we'd like to close on it tomorrow if we can. Well, you gave them the bad news that it was going to take a couple days, but the realtors are amazed that you've closed this property and it's closing today, which I believe we're on day 5 of since they signed a contract. So you can do, and being diligent is truly a watchword for you. So thank you on behalf of that client. They're very happy. So what's the biggest fear that you have as a business owner?
That we close our doors to all the foreigners.
Very good. Because they're what make Miami special, aren't they?
Yeah, we have to differentiate between bad people and good people. And when we lump that all together, we're going to have a bad result. And we depend, our city is built on foreigners.
Yeah.
So we have to be receptive. We have to speak their language. We have to make them feel comfortable. And if they can't get a visa to come see Mickey Mouse, we have a big problem.
Yeah. So, and speaking their language, habla español?
Por supuesto.
Okay. What's a life quote that you love or rules that you live by?
A life quote. We're basically instruments of doing good and looking out for our fellow man, for people that are less fortunate than us, using our knowledge and our talents to the maximum and not wasting them.
Very good. And the last one, if someone is thinking about buying a property here in Florida, when should they call a real estate lawyer like you? Before the contract, after the contract, or before closing?
Before the contract.
Good deal. And Andy, this has been fantastic, and I appreciate your time. And I know that you're a busy guy, and I know you're doing one closing today, and you probably have multiple. But real estate's one of the most powerful ways people build wealth here in Florida. But as we've learned today, the legal side of the deal is what protects the wealth. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for giving us some insights on what those pitfalls are and the importance of having a quarterback on your team as an investor or a buyer. And remember, in real estate, the difference between a great investment and a very expensive mistake is often the things you don't see until someone who understands the system shows you where to look. If this conversation helped you understand how to protect yourself when you're buying property in Florida, share this episode with someone that you think would benefit. Drop a comment and let us know what topics you'd like to learn more about and what we can provide that information here on The Marty Davis Show. And if you want more conversations about business, investing, and protecting your assets, subscribe to The Marty Davis Show wherever you watch your podcast. I'm Marty Davis and look forward to seeing you in the next episode.